And as you've said, my name is Henry Yatich, the current Dean, School of Business and Economics at Mount Kenya University in Kenya. And I'm happy to represent the African business schools and hoping that we are going to build more partnership from today going forward. Allow me to say that I'm also the current steering committee member of the AACSB Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and I'm also a member of Africa's Center for Skill Support, which is a consortium of 6 universities drawn from Africa and 1 institution from Germany. So having said that, allow me to share my screen. So I think, as I said, that I'm happy to be here and to speak to the Claddia family. And I'm going to discuss basically the adaptability of schools of business in Africa when we come to this agenda of promoting inclusivity and universalism of training in management, and specifically what are the challenges and what are the rejoinders of Africa's business schools. And I want to draw my presentation by also appreciating that looking at my co-presenters, you will notice that when you look at Europe, Latin America, and Africa, I take notice of the divergence in terms of the concept of inclusion. Empirical review, if you go to the literature review and try to look at what many researchers talk about when it comes to inclusivity in Africa, you will find that mostly they are oriented towards gender, peoples with disabilities, and more about what Magali had spoken about when he talked about corporate integration, equity, and transversality of academics. And therefore, that is the divergence that we have in Africa when we talk about inclusion and diversity, and also the element of universalism. One thing that also you will notice in Africa is that we tend to have outward mobility rather than inward mobility. And this is as a result of socio-economic factors, which tend to make many students or citizens of Africa to move to other nations in Latin America, in Europe, in the Americas, and so forth. And that is where you find now that there is a disconnect between the contribution of Africa's business school to the universal agenda. And it is because of that belief that Africa institutions of higher learning are still growing. And that also means that even when it comes to the discussion of universalism and inclusive education, you will find actually that Africa is slowly making the baby steps to ensure that this is also practiced in the schools of business. And therefore, I want to look at some of the historical treaties or policies that many institutions of higher learning in Africa are trying to borrow from and try to implement the practice of inclusivity and diversity. And one of the key convention is the United Nations Convention of 1948. And here, this convention advances or promotes or talks about inclusivity and equal access to higher education. And what does that mean for Africa? It means that by 1948, most countries in Africa had not attained independence. And even after that, you will find that many institutions of higher learning in Africa and even governments have not taken seriously the issue of inclusivity and diversity. And when I talk about inclusivity and diversity in Africa, you always find that many often we talk about gender, we talk about peoples with disabilities, and less of academia. And that is why you'll find that when you visit many institutions in Africa, the issue of inclusivity is taught less because we are actually coming to a realization that this is something that is important and it is something that needs to be advanced so that we can promote the universal agenda of training. We are also considering the United Nations 2030 agenda. And when we look at the agenda of the 2030, we are looking at the element of quality education and lifelong learning. And one of the key issues of this agenda is the issue to deal with empowerment of women. And this is synonymous with African countries. I think if you look at Europe, you'll actually find that the element of gender has been addressed to a great extent. But if you come to Africa, you will find that we are still grappling with the issue of gender, peoples with disability, and marginalized communities. And this has an effect, a negative effect to access to higher education and most probably to the schools of business. Allow me to share with this family of CLADEA that in Africa, and basically in Kenya where I am, most students who go to the university tend to pick on the business courses. And one of the surveys that was done in Kenya recently in 2018 by the Federation of Kenyan Employers revealed that that was the true position. And so in business schools, we now ask ourselves, how do we ensure that we are training graduates for the global economy and not just for the local economy? And that is why you will notice that the issue of universalism comes in Africa, and we are trying to make the baby steps to ensure that we also run very fast and ensure that we catch up with the rest of our family, friends and colleagues in Europe, in the Americas, and in the Latin America. So what are the challenges in Africa's institutions of higher learning when we discuss the issue of inclusivity? As I mentioned, is that we tend to have a divergency of the concept of inclusivity, looking at what Magali had presented earlier and my other co-presenter. Because in Africa, we tend to look mostly at gender orientation. We look at peoples with disabilities, and then we look at socioeconomic status in terms of marginalized communities, and this can either be culturally or economically. We also still look at the issues of ethnicity and the age. A literature review and empirical studies show that the youth in Africa are the most marginalized of late in terms of access to employment and to the labor market. We tend to have a political system that tends to appoint people who are either affiliated to their parties, to the detriment of the youth who are year in out. We tend to graduate more students into the labor market, but the market is not able to absorb these students. And one of the challenges that is attributed to the issue of the youth not being able to access the market, and in that case now promoting the issue of inclusivity even in employment, is the issue of knowledge-based curriculum. In Africa and in most business schools, our curriculum is basically knowledge-based, and we are at a point now where we are trying to review the curriculum, as Makari had said earlier on, so that by reviewing the curriculums, we are able to adapt international standards of training so that we can be able to ensure that our students are able to also compete globally and in many other economies outside Africa. And I also did mention that one of the challenges that we have in Africa is the issue of political orientation of when it comes to employment, staffing, and promotion, even in universities. For example, you will notice, for example, that in Kenya, some of the people who are appointed to run public universities are political appointees, and most oftenly, the political class will appoint these people depending on affiliation of political parties at the expense of merit, which is supposed to be the idea behind the UN agenda of ensuring equality of access that is based on merit. So what has the schools of business and higher education sector in Africa done so that they can respond to the issues of universalism and also to promote the concept of inclusion and diversity? One thing that you will notice, and I'm going to use the example of my country, Kenya, is the issue or the affirmative action of subsidizing university education. And by subsidizing university education, most people or most young people are able to access university education. And as I mentioned, most students always tend to choose business-related programs. And by doing that, you are able to promote access to training and ensure that you have all people from different backgrounds with different disadvantages so that they can be able to access university education and also be able to compete on a fair scale with the rest of the students from the country. Other than that, also you will notice in Kenya, for example, we have the policy of lowering of entry grades to university, especially for the female students. So you will find that in Kenya, there is always the girls who normally, or the ladies who normally join universities, are allowed to join the university with 1 grade lower than their male counterparts. And this is to ensure that there is inclusivity and promote equality of access to university education. This also applies to marginalized communities who come from challenging socioeconomic backgrounds. And in Africa, some regions are not well developed. And even in Kenya, you will still find that we have some areas within the country that are not well developed. Culturally, they are not well developed. And therefore, what the higher education sector has done is to ensure that those affirmative actions are implemented in higher institution of learning so that they can also be able to have access to training. The other thing that we also pride ourselves in Africa is slowly the issue of implementation of the available laws. So some of the constitution, for example, in Kenya was revised in 2010, and there are so many good proposals and acts in that constitution that tends to lean on the issue of promoting diversity and inclusivity in the higher education sector and also in the labor market. And therefore, this has slowly ensured that people from marginalized communities, the gender, people with disabilities are able to access university training. And one thing that you will notice is that across many universities today, you will find that there is continuous improvement in terms of girls and people with disabilities accessing training. And most basically is when I talk about training, I'm looking at schools of business, which takes the lion's share of most of the students who proceed from secondary school to the universities to access university education. Least but not last is that one of the things that also many governments in Africa are doing is to give students loans. And with these loans, students from poor economic backgrounds and marginalized communities are able to access training at the university. And for business schools, we take advantage of that because we are able to receive more students who choose business related programs. Other than this, in Kenya, we also have people who are refugees in this country. And as a result of instabilities in their countries like South Sudan, we have Somalia for that case, and we also have the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. So in Mount Kenya, for example, in the School of Business, we have those students from different backgrounds who are able to come to Kenya and access education. And one of the things that most institutions have done is to consider giving them some small type of grants and maybe waivers for fee payment so that they can be able to access university education in Kenya. Currently, for example, in Kenya, again, as I mentioned about the issue of promoting access to university education, is the government is considering giving university graduates a moratorium of up to 7 years once you graduate so that you can repay your loan. And this stems from the challenge of the youth being not in a position to access employment once they graduate. So the challenge of unemployment in African in African countries is an issue that the Kenyan government is considering, that because these students, when they graduate, they are not able to access employment, then they should be given a waiver of up to 7 years before they start repaying their loans. And this is in the anticipation that they are able by that time to have secured employment or maybe started their own businesses. Other than that, again, is that the UNESCO, one of the issues that also most institutions of higher learning has facilitated to ensure people with disabilities are able to access university education is also to implement the UNESCO proposal and policy that ensures that people with disabilities are also given equal chances. And most universities currently in Kenya, and I think also in Africa, I was able to visit South Africa in January, have put in place mechanisms to ensure access among the peoples with disabilities. The other thing that I also want to mention is that if you look at South Africa, then when it comes to the issue of inclusivity and diversity, South Africa is one of the countries that got independence recently, around 1994 there. And one thing that we are aware of South Africa is that after the post-apartheid regime in South Africa, most universities have not been able to absorb students from the middle class or the low class communities. And therefore, the government of South Africa started introducing free higher education for students who want to access university education, especially from the Black communities. And they are given approximately around 350,000 rands per year so that they can be able to proceed with their education. And this has been able to improve access and ensure inclusivity in most South African schools of business. The other thing again that we consider that it's a gain for us in Africa, even as we continue learning and enhancing the agenda of diversity and inclusivity, is also the clamor for accreditation of business schools. So we believe that by pursuing these accreditations, we are able to also to compare ourselves with world-class universities in Latin America, in France, in Europe, so that we can be in a position to produce graduates that can compete globally with any other student from the world. And therefore, we believe that that is one of the key issues that if African business schools can do by pursuing accreditation with, like, for example, AMBA, AACSP, AABS, then we are able to improve our curricula, improve our training so that we can be able to meet the expectations of the globe, of the industries across the globe. And therefore, I also want to agree with Margaret that curricula is one of the key issues that will enable African institutions of higher learning, and for that case, schools of business, to review their curriculums, which I always consider them to be knowledge-based so that they can be practice-oriented. And by doing that, we are able to compete globally with also other schools of business that are training our global leaders. And for that case, we believe that in Africa, that is one of the agenda right now of reviewing the curriculums. And in Mount Kenya University, for example, for the last 1 year, we've been able to review about 2 curriculums from the School of Business using the DACAM approach. And this was also a collaborative venture with one organization, the Swiss Contact Kenya. And we believe that if we go along this route, we are able to produce students that are able to compete globally. The other thing that I also want to mention to the Claddia region is that currently we have about 42 African countries, which actually represents 79% of the countries in Africa, promoting or who have actually implemented the free basic education, or what we call free primary education. And by doing this, we consider this an avenue of increasing access for students from marginalized communities to TVETs and to the universities. And therefore, in Kenya, for example, we've seen this contributing to increase in the number of students accessing higher education in business-related programs and many other programs. And I say business-related programs because in Kenya, for example, and many other countries, we have a ceiling on the STEM programs because of the nature and the cost that is involved. So you will find that most students then to choose the business related courses because they don't have any ceiling, they are not regulated, and by that they are able to pursue their courses that they want. And therefore, by doing that, we have continued to see continued increase of people with disabilities, the gender in terms of the female gender, people who are living below the poverty line, and marginalized communities accessing education. And therefore, we believe by doing that, we are able to advance the agenda of inclusivity and diversification. The other thing that I also want to share with CLADEA is that we believe that by implementing the national qualification frameworks, and by doing that, I make reference to the UNESCO framework, is that we are able to ensure that students from Kenya are able to access institutions in CLADEA or in Europe or in Americas by transferring credits. And by doing that, we believe that the national qualification frameworks will be able to provide cross-border access of our students. Students from Europe can come to Africa, they can be given credits. Students from Africa can come to CLADEA universities to do collaborative ventures. They can be given credits. And at the end of the day, we are able to share experiences and promote the universalism of training and learning. What are my conclusions when it comes to the issues of universality and diversity and inclusivity in business schools? I believe that today I'm presenting to CLADEA that Africa is still growing, and therefore we have opportunities that we believe that by working together with CLADEA, we are able to promote the issue of curricular revision, the issue of national qualification frameworks, so that students can move from one country to the other. And by doing that, we are able to culturally learn, academically learn, and be able to come back and bring ideas from other countries. And therefore, we are able to promote the universalism of training and ensuring that every idea is equally acceptable or can be implemented in a different region. And therefore, I submit to CLADEA that schools in Africa are still growing. We are still learning when it comes to the issues of diversity and inclusivity, and that presents a lot of opportunities for institutions in CLADEA to collaborate with business schools in Africa so that we can promote the issue of training. We can also ensure that we are able to enable our students to richly benefit from the cultures, from the experiences of developing countries. And I think by doing that, we are able to promote the universalism of training and also ensuring that we share and appreciate that every human being is able to work in any other place of the world, as long as we ensure that we are all working on the same frame and we are able to borrow and learn from one another. I look forward to answering questions and also discussing with this family of CLADEA. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Henry. Thank you very much. I believe everybody like me was very, very interested in your presentation of all the steps you are doing in Kenya and in Africa to converge to some criteria of universality and common ideals concerning, of course, the necessity of inclusion and integration, which is the same, of the society to give an increase of knowledge, skills, etc., in the diverse parts of your countries. As representative of CLADEA, I'm an elected member in the steering committee of CLADEA. I wanted to, but my colleagues of CLADEA will probably confirm that I wanted to thank you a lot for your beautiful and magnificent conclusion, offering, of course, to our Latin American partners an absolutely fraternal and open invitation to cooperation between two continents and between all our continents. I believe this is the sense of all our association, of your association in Africa, ABS, and of course, the sense of the CLADEA organization, which is deeply involved in human cooperation around the world. And I am a member of the European Union and all the European organizations by Erasmus, Socrates, etc., to try to cooperate in the sense of getting really an intelligently open universe and a human community to work together in reducing poverty. This is a key issue in the world, and to create at the end, and this is even one of the key issues of the United Nations and of the UNESCO. At the end, we are two working on peace in the world. I believe this is even one of the responsibilities of our business schools. We are teaching competencies, we are teaching to compete with others, but we have to do that with absolutely a deep respect of humanity. This is a part of the social and international responsibility of our business schools. No, I believe the moment is arrived to start with a discussion. And I see here, I see here one question, uh, that is posed to you, Henry. What kind of support do you think that business schools in Latin America, in the Claddia region, can offer to African business schools in advancing universality in academia?
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I think that's a very good question in the sense that in my conclusion, I presented an opportunity for CLADEA family to reach out to institutions of business in Africa. And the kind of support that I would suggest would be very fundamental for the schools of business in Africa is in three ways. The first one, I would say we need to be able to look at how you design and develop your curricula. And because we know that in Latin America, we have institutions that work closely with the industries, we need to see the dynamism in terms of your curricular development so that institutions in Africa, because right now we are actually trying to do curricular revision, we should be able to learn from you and see what content and what type of pedagogies that you input in your curricula that we can be able to also improve our curricula. Number two, Yvonne, is that I also look at it in terms of partnership, which are cross-cultural and academic in nature. And I want to agree with Marguerite that we are also looking at leveraging the innovativeness of technology. At the moment, we can have a professor from Cuba teaching for us, a student in Mount Kenya University, or supervising for us a postgraduate student. And therefore, that is the kind of partnership I look at it, because in terms of cost, it will be cheaper to have co-supervision from professors in Claddia region supervising our students in Africa. And similarly, also, we can be able to have supervisors from universities in Africa, schools of business, supervising students in Claddia region. And least but not last is that I'm also considering that it is important that we consider that Africa socioeconomically is growing, and in that, by appreciating that fact, some institutions still are grappling with the issue to do with finances. And I think when it comes to grant writing, we can work together with institutions in Latin America by maybe applying for grants together, or maybe sharing projects that are of benefit to each of the two regions. And by doing that, we are able now to expose our faculty and students to the global arena of training. And by that, we are able to promote universalism and continuously promote the issue of inclusivity and diversity.
Thank you very much. I have to look other questions. Maybe if you allow me, Henry, again, this time, this is a question of mine coming from Europe. When a very short and technical question, but very important question. When you speak that your students, would it get a loan from the government of any bank, have a moratorium of up to 7 years before they have to repay the loan? Is that submitted to interest rates? And if yes, what is the level of the interest rates?
That's another good question. I'm going to give you an example of Kenya. And I gave that example because I'm drawing references to my country. And what the government is considering is that, first of all, to answer your question, is that the interest rate is usually at 4%. It is pegged at 4% per annum. However, for the 7-year period that the government is considering giving students a waiver of not paying, no interest is going to be levied on that loan.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Some other questions to anybody? To Magali, to Jose? Magali, Jose, Henry, do you have questions one to each other? Because you did work on that topic, and maybe one of you is interested to ask the colleague about what is happening in his country or in his university.
But first, I was very interesting to see the different movements and adaptation to this idea of inclusion, diversity, and universalism in different contexts, because the reality is always plural, as we said. But I found the trajectories very, very interesting in what we are dealing with. Maybe one question that I have is that in line with these evolutions of inclusion, I would like to know how has it forced you in Africa or in Latin America to change a little bit the business models of your business school, because you're both deans, and that's something I would be interested in. And to see, we talk about digital innovation, we talk about different things, but I would be very interesting to hear your voice on this specific topic. Thank you.
Okay, I think in Africa, what I can say is that there is the model of business schools has always been training students, and we have never been able to consider the interests of other stakeholders like the labor market and the industry. And therefore, the issue of working with industries to ensure that we are producing graduates that are going to be absorbed by the industry came to a realization at the very latest in 2017. That was the point in Kenya that the government started to realize that it is important to work with the industries so that we can be able to model our curricula and our mode of training so that we can be able to work together with the industry and ensure that these students, once they graduate, they are able to fit into the needs of the labor market. At the moment, I'll just give you an example. At the moment in Mount Kenya University School of Business, we are considering also bringing on board the concept of community service learning. And we believe that by doing that, we will be able to expose students to the practical aspect of what they learn in class. And we believe that by slowly improving the model of learning, then we should be able to produce students that not only can work here in Kenya, but can work in the larger East Africa, the Sub-Saharan Africa, Africa in general, and probably also they can be able to come to France and be able to work in France. And so that is what the kind of the model that we are trying now to build.
Thank you very much. I have a question from Carlos Baldo, and I will make a small resume of the question. The question is of Carlos. Are the initiatives presented by the presenters in alignment to the external accreditation agencies? Concretely, you know what it means. And it is two questions in one text. And the second question of Carlos is, considering that some presenters belong to institutions subsidized by their government, how they later accept these external accreditation agencies. Who is an institution subsidized by the local government? MBS not. Jose.
Maybe Jose, yes, okay.
No Jose, problem. Is your institution subsidized by your government?
Sí. Bueno, en el caso del Tecnológico de Costa Rica, es una universidad estatal, forma parte de las 5 universidades del Estado y sí es financiada con recursos del gobierno. En el tema de la pregunta me parece que sí, porque en algunos de los planteamientos van en función, por ejemplo, del desarrollo y la consolidación de la investigación, y cualquier agencia acreditadora del mundo pues va a evaluar muchísimo y le va a dar mucho impacto al desarrollo de la investigación y la producción científica. Entonces, me parece que por ese lado, pues esas recomendaciones sí están alineadas. Igual que la internacionalización es valorada prácticamente por todos los agentes acreditadores.
Henry?
I can also give some experiences from South Africa. And in South Africa, University of Cape Town. University of Cape Town is a government institution. It is partially funded by the government. And the quest for accreditation is supported by the government, because in University of Cape Town, you'll find you have the IGRIP School of Business, which is a triple-star accredited institution by AMBA, by AACSB, and I believe it is in line with the government also. I think with the government expectation, it is in line. My university is a private university and we are not bound by the government, and so we are able to pursue those accreditation. But I also know that the government supports such initiatives because it promotes, it enables the students who get trained to also access external markets when they're looking for employment, not just locally. So I think I submit that they are well aligned.
I can make a small contribution about the first part of the question about accreditations. I might say that nowadays, like I'm not a specialist, but we are accredited. So, and I've been part of the audit, so I can say a few words about that. For EQUIS, like they have a huge chapter about corporate social responsibility, any kind of internationalization as well, and issues of inclusion are naturally aligned, I think, with this part of requirements of EQUIS. For ACSB, we have an expert here, but we are in the audit now, and I might say that they favor as much as they can, I think, impact engagement, innovation, and impact, and in particular, question to inclusion can be related to this aspect. And same for EMBA, I must say. So I think it's quite coherent, and this accreditation are changing a lot nowadays to, I think, to include more and more new criteria for assessment. For example, impactful research, that's something that is in development. And this notion of inclusion, diversity, I think is a growing trend as well, if we can call that a trend. Sorry for that.
Carlos, I wanted to give you even my own answer, not as much as a professor at Montpellier Business School, but generally, you are right. In countries, in particular in the European Union, many, not to say 100% of the universities are under public financiation. It looks like it would be free, no fees. In reality, when you see what a French citizen or a German citizen or a Danish citizen is paying on taxes up to more than 60%, then you know that the public financiation does not mean that this is free, of course, but everybody is contributing to that. No, in France, for example, in any European country, the state at the end has the power, the right, and even the duty to protect the title and the degrees, so that each program has to be evaluated by the state to allowed to be the base for the award of a public degree protected by law. This is first. You may be a state university, which is quasi 90% or 100%, or a private or half private university in the status, something like the business schools in France. In France, you have 77 business schools. You have 32 who are under the same status as Montpellier. Some of them are very, very famous, HEC, ESSEC, etc. And outside of Paris, Montpellier, Toulouse, etc. We are in a particular status, but we are submitted exactly to the same evaluation as the public university. No, the philosophy of the state, the French Republic or the German state, are totally indifferent to international accreditation. This is not an issue for the state. They have nothing for that, nothing against that. This is two different things. But if you are accredited by any accreditation, but not by the local state, then you are nothing. You have to go really fighting against adversity. So that the main accreditation in Europe is the accreditation by the local state. This is the reason why in countries where the state is very strong and with a very strong control of quality, Scandinavian, Germany, Holland, Netherlands, Austria, France, etc., then you will see that this is not so much desire to be accredited, because you have the state's accreditation, and for us, it's enough. Public university is not that the state are not happy with that or don't like that, but you don't feel the need. Business schools like Montpellier, yes, we have the double accreditation by agencies and by the states, and we are happy to be accredited because this is an additional way of international recognitions. But public universities are not considering that they really need that. Not only in France, in Europe. Maybe I see that the time is slowly over, that we did abuse a little with the time. Maybe for the conclusion, two things. I wanted maybe to ask maybe Magali, if you could have a general word about inclusivity. Why is that word today, do you believe, so important in what any universities in the world is, a business school is speaking of? Why is that so a leading concept today?
I think it's in my view, it's a leading concept by necessity. It's a way, as we said, to tackle in the same time universalism and pluralism. And for me, that's an interesting concept just for this specific reason, because it helps us to think knowledge and curriculum with their universalist requirements, but also with particularities, local needs, etc. And I think also it's a very important topic on a more moral or ethical thinking, not to be sure, and I speak for a big business school as we have in Europe or France, to be able not to reproduce inequalities, as I said maybe before, and maybe also to build the foundation to be able to tackle tomorrow ground challenges. So that's really why for me this concept is still important, economically speaking as well, because we are not alone. And if we want to solve some issues, and we saw that in the presentation, we need to consider this working together in our diversity. And I think it's very important.
Thank you very much. No, I wanted to say many thanks to everybody. It was a big pleasure, a big honor, and to be able to converse with you. I wanted to tell you again that the next session will take place on the 21st of January 2021, and the topic will be the variety of conceptions and actions in business school to train in sustainability and social responsibility, universality in needs and diversity in solutions. And the moderator will be my colleague Magali. I will be less present the next time. Thank you to everybody. And now I believe the president will speak to our community.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yvonne, for all your work and all the entire program you have organized. I just came into the meeting because I was teaching at the MBA level, so I wasn't able to enter before. But just to say thank you to you, to Manuel, and all the team in Lima who was behind the connection and all the technical aspects. And thank you very much to everybody. More than 150 people in one event. That's great for us. Thank you for promoting CLADEA and for trusting in us and supporting all activities that we are doing, even more in such important topics like the one you told us, Yvonne. So thank you very much to you and to everybody. And that's it. So I had to see the recording because I wasn't able to see. So I'm sorry. But
Thank you, Andres. Thank you, Andres. Thank you.
And I can see Alberto Zapatero, so my dear friend over there. So good to see you, Alberto.
Alberto, very happy to see you. And to Jose Talentino también, I know he did do a beautiful job, and to my colleagues in Montpellier too, because they were very busy and enthusiastic in preparing this meeting. Bye-bye. And I wish to everybody a good, in these complicated times, a very good end of the year, and happy Christmas, of course, with your family. And we'll see you next year. Bye-bye.
Bye, have a great.
Bye-bye, thanks a lot.
Holidays and
Gracias, Magali.
Bye-bye, thank you.
And I can see also Jose Martinez over there.
Yes.
Okay, Jose, ¿cómo estás?
Jose, bye-bye.